the B67 TV tower.
I haven't climbed since Becky. Let's do it. Let's climb your stupid tower. I was really ripped. You're awesome. This is sick. Damn it, I'm totally getting this one at a time. You're doing great.
Welcome to Z Cineplex, say your ultimate entertainment destination. Welcome to Z Cineplex, the home of entertainment, creativity, and cinematic excitement. Our channel is dedicated to bringing viewers a rich collection of engaging content that celebrates the world of movies, storytelling, and visual entertainment. Whether you're a passionate film enthusiast, someone who enjoys discovering new cinematic experiences, or simply looking for high-quality entertainment, Z Cineplex is designed to be your go-to destination. We strive to create content that is informative, enjoyable, and engaging for audiences of all ages, offering a unique blend of movie-related features, entertainment updates, insightful discussions, creative videos, and much more. Every upload is crafted with attention to quality, ensuring that our viewers receive an enjoyable experience that keeps them coming back for more. At Z Cineplex, we believe that cinema is more than just watching films. It's about experiencing emotions, exploring stories, appreciating creativity, and connecting with people who share the same passion for entertainment. Our mission is to build a vibrant community where movie lovers and entertainment enthusiasts can discover exciting content, share their opinions, and stay connected with the latest trends in the entertainment industry. We are committed to consistently improving our content, embracing new ideas, and delivering videos that entertain, inform, and inspire our growing audience. Whether you're here for movie highlights, entertainment discussions, reviews, cinematic moments, or fresh creative content, Z Cineplex promises an enjoyable journey filled with excitement, quality, and unforgettable entertainment. Join our community by subscribing, turning on notifications, and becoming part of the Z Cineplex family as we continue to explore the fascinating world of cinema and entertainment together. Thank you for your support, and welcome to Z Cineplex, wherever video brings entertainment to life. Fall is a 2022 American survival psychological thriller film directed by Scott Mann, who co-wrote the screenplay with Jonathan Frank. Combining elements of survival drama, psychological suspense, and intense thriller storytelling, the film centers on themes of fear, grief, resilience, friendship, and the human will to survive under seemingly impossible circumstances. The film stars Grace Carolyn Curry as Becky Connor, Virginia Gardner as Hunter Shiloh, Mason Gooding as Dan Connor, and Jeffrey Dean Morgan as James Connor. Set against the breathtaking yet terrifying backdrop of an abandoned television broadcasting tower rising approximately 2,000 feet, 610 meters, above the desert floor, the story follows two adventurous best friends whose attempt to conquer one of the tallest structures in the United States quickly turns into a desperate fight for survival after they become stranded at the summit with no immediate means of escape. Isolated from civilization and facing dwindling supplies, extreme weather, physical exhaustion, and mounting psychological pressure, the pair must rely on their courage, ingenuity, and determination while confronting both the dangers surrounding them and the emotional burdens they have carried for years. The film was released theatrically in the United States on August 12, 2022, by Lionsgate Films, where it attracted attention for its unique high-concept premise and its relentless use of vertigo-inducing cinematography. Despite being produced on a modest $3 million budget, Fall proved to be a commercial success, earning more than $21 million worldwide during its theatrical run. Its financial performance demonstrated the film's ability to generate significant audience interest through strong word-of-mouth, suspense-driven marketing, and its innovative approach to survival storytelling. The production was particularly praised for creating an intense sense of realism despite its limited budget, utilizing practical locations, carefully designed visual effects, and immersive camera work to place viewers directly alongside the protagonists high above the ground. Upon its release, Fall received generally positive reviews from critics, who praised its ability to sustain tension throughout its runtime while delivering an emotionally driven survival narrative. Particular acclaim was directed toward the performances of Grace Carolyn Curry and Virginia Gardner, whose convincing portrayals of Becky and Hunter were widely recognized for conveying both physical endurance and emotional vulnerability under extreme circumstances. Critics also commended the film's effective atmosphere, suspenseful pacing, and breathtaking cinematography, noting that its convincing depiction of extreme heights created a powerful sense of anxiety and immersion for audiences. However, some reviewers expressed criticism regarding portions of the screenplay, suggesting that certain narrative developments required considerable suspension of disbelief, while others felt that some visual effects occasionally diminished the otherwise realistic presentation. Despite these criticisms, the film was widely regarded as an entertaining and suspenseful thriller that successfully transformed a simple premise into a gripping cinematic experience. The success of Fall led to the development of a sequel, Fall 2, Dead Point, which continues expanding the franchise's survival thriller concept. Scheduled for release in September 2026, the sequel is expected to introduce a new chapter featuring another high-stakes survival scenario while retaining the tension, psychological intensity, and adrenaline-fueled suspense that made the original film a favorite among thriller audiences. With the announcement of the sequel, Fall has evolved from a standalone survival thriller into the foundation of an emerging franchise, further cementing its reputation as one of the most memorable survival films of the early 2020s. Fall begins with an exhilarating mountain climbing expedition undertaken by experienced climbers Becky Connor, her adventurous best friend Shiloh Hunter, and Becky's husband Dan Connor. The trio ascends a towering rock face, relying on their skill, teamwork, and years of climbing experience. As they approach the summit, disaster strikes when Dan is startled by a bat flying unexpectedly from the cliff face. Losing his grip, he falls from the mountain, and despite Becky's desperate attempts to save him, his safety rope fails, causing him to plunge to his death. The horrifying accident leaves Becky emotionally shattered, forever changing her life. Traumatized by witnessing the death of the person she loved most, Becky abandons climbing altogether, withdraws from her friends and family, and spirals into deep grief and depression. Over the following year, she becomes reckless, turning to alcohol and isolating herself from the outside world while quietly contemplating suicide. Her relationship with her father, James Connor, also deteriorates after he bluntly tells her that Dan would never have wanted her to destroy her own life through grief if their roles had been reversed. Feeling misunderstood and unable to move forward, Becky distances herself from James, convinced that no one truly understands the pain she continues to carry. Nearly 1 year after Don's death, Shiloh unexpectedly reappears in Becky's life with an unusual proposal. A thrill-seeking adventurer and social media influencer known for documenting dangerous stunts on her YouTube channel, Shiloh believes Becky needs one final climb to confront her fears and begin healing. She suggests that the two of them climb the abandoned B-67 television broadcasting tower, a decommissioned structure standing approximately 2,000 feet, 610 meters, above the desert floor and scheduled to be demolished in the near future. According to Shiloh, scattering Don's ashes from the top of the tower would allow Becky to finally let go of her guilt and begin a new chapter of her life. Although deeply hesitant and still haunted by traumatic memories of Don's death, Becky eventually agrees, hoping that the climb may provide the emotional closure she has been unable to find. The following day, Becky and Shiloh travel deep into an isolated desert landscape where the rusting B-67 tower rises high above the surrounding terrain. After leaving their vehicle at the base, the pair begin the grueling ascent using a series of old metal ladders and maintenance platforms that have clearly suffered decades of weathering and corrosion. As they climb higher, the structure becomes increasingly unstable, with rusted bolts, loose steps, and swaying platforms emphasizing the danger of their undertaking. After an exhausting climb, they finally reach the tiny maintenance platform at the summit. There, Shiloh encourages Becky to conquer her lingering fear by briefly stepping off the platform while suspended only by her climbing harness, recording the daring stunt for her online audience. Becky reluctantly overcomes her terror, successfully completing the free-hanging challenge before solemnly scattering Dawn's ashes into the wind. For a brief moment, she feels an overwhelming sense of peace, believing she has finally honored her husband's memory. Their relief is short-lived. As Becky and Shiloh begin descending the tower, catastrophe strikes when the heavily corroded upper ladder suddenly collapses beneath them. Becky falls hundreds of feet before being violently stopped by the safety rope connecting her to Shiloh. Although Shiloh manages to pull Becky back onto the platform, the women quickly realize they are trapped at the very top of the tower. The destroyed ladder has left an enormous gap between them and the next accessible section of the structure, making descent impossible. During the fall, Becky also suffers a deep cut to her thigh, further complicating their situation. Their backpack, containing nearly all of their food, drinking water, climbing supplies, and a small quadcopter drone, falls onto one of the large communications dishes mounted several hundred feet below them, leaving them with almost nothing to survive. Initially, Shiloh remains optimistic, believing someone nearby must have heard the ladder collapse or noticed their vehicle parked below. However, as hours pass with no sign of rescue, the severity of their situation becomes increasingly apparent. The women discover that although their mobile phones still have battery power, the tower's powerful communications equipment creates electromagnetic interference that prevents them from obtaining a signal. Refusing to surrender, Shiloh improvises a rescue attempt by placing her phone inside one of her shoes and dropping it beyond the range of the signal interference, hoping the phone will automatically send a distress message to her Instagram followers once it reconnects to a cellular network. Time passes painfully slowly beneath the relentless desert sun. Eventually, Becky and Shiloh spot a lone man walking nearby with his dog, raising their hopes that rescue has finally arrived. Despite shouting desperately, waving their arms, and attempting to attract his attention, the immense height of the tower prevents him from hearing them. The man eventually joins another individual camping in a nearby recreational vehicle. As darkness falls, Becky and Shiloh discover an emergency flare gun stored in a maintenance box on the platform and fire it toward the campers. The flare successfully captures the man's attention, but instead of investigating, they steal Shiloh's parked vehicle and flee the area, leaving the stranded women devastated. The failed rescue attempt also convinces them that Shiloh's phone was likely destroyed upon impact, as no emergency responders arrive. As dehydration, exhaustion, and emotional strain intensify, long-hidden personal secrets begin to surface. Becky notices a tattoo on Shiloh's ankle reading 143, the numerical code Dan had often used to tell Becky "I love you." Unable to hide the truth any longer, Shiloh tearfully confesses that she and Dan had engaged in a secret affair lasting approximately 4 months before Becky and Dawn's wedding. Although the relationship ended before the marriage, the revelation deeply wounds Becky, who feels betrayed by both the two people she trusted most. The confession creates painful tension between the friends, but their desperate circumstances leave little opportunity to dwell on the emotional consequences. Realizing they cannot survive much longer without water, Shiloh undertakes an extraordinarily dangerous mission. Using one of their climbing ropes, she lowers herself hundreds of feet down the side of the tower toward the communications dish where their backpack landed. Battling exhaustion, fear, and intense pain as the rusted structure cuts into her hands, she eventually reaches the dish and secures the backpack before Becky slowly hauls both the supplies and Shiloh back toward the summit. Although successful, the rescue leaves Shiloh severely injured and physically exhausted. That night, Becky experiences a horrifying nightmare in which vultures descend upon the tower and begin feeding on Shiloh's lifeless body, foreshadowing the increasingly desperate struggle for survival that lies ahead. Searching for another means of escape, Becky devises an innovative plan using the tower's aviation obstruction warning light to recharge the drone's depleted battery. After painstakingly restoring enough power, she attaches a handwritten distress message to the drone and pilots it toward a nearby roadside motel, believing someone there may alert emergency services. For a brief moment, success appears possible. However, tragedy strikes once again when the drone flies directly into the path of a passing truck, which destroys it instantly and eliminates what may have been their final chance of contacting the outside world. As dehydration worsens and Becky slips in and out of consciousness, her grip on reality begins to deteriorate. During a brief moment of clarity, she finally realizes a horrifying truth that both she and the audience have been unable to recognize. Shiloh never survived her climb to retrieve the backpack. She actually fell onto one of the communications dishes below, dying instantly from the impact. Unable to cope with the complete isolation, Becky has unconsciously hallucinated Shiloh's continued presence throughout the remainder of the ordeal, imagining conversations, arguments, encouragement, and companionship as a psychological defense against unbearable loneliness. The revelation completely recontextualizes the latter portion of the story, revealing that Becky has truly been alone atop the tower for days. The following morning, Becky awakens to find a hungry vulture pecking at the wound on her injured leg. Driven by pure survival instinct, she fights back, killing the bird before cooking and eating it to regain enough strength for one final rescue attempt. Accepting the reality of Shiloh's death, Becky carefully rappels down to the communications dish where her friend's body remains. Using a second mobile phone recovered from the backpack, she writes a heartfelt text message to her father explaining their situation and asking for help. She then places the phone inside Shiloh's shoe before securing it to her friend's body. With no other options remaining, Becky pushes Shiloh's body from the tower. The body lands on the desert floor below, cushioning the impact sufficiently for the phone to survive long enough to reconnect with the cellular network and successfully transmit the message. Miles away, James receives Becky's desperate text and immediately contacts emergency services. Rescue personnel race to the remote tower, where they successfully save Becky after days of unimaginable physical and psychological suffering. The ordeal concludes with an emotional reunion between Becky and her father. The two reconcile, finally expressing the love, grief, and forgiveness they had been unable to share since Don's death. Having survived both the impossible physical challenge of being stranded atop the tower and the overwhelming emotional trauma that had haunted her for over a year, Becky ultimately emerges with the renewed appreciation for life, completing a journey defined not only by survival but also by healing, acceptance, and the courage to move forward after devastating loss. The cast of Fall is led by a talented ensemble whose performances bring emotional depth, realism, and intensity to the film's gripping survival story. Although the narrative features a relatively small number of characters, each plays an essential role in developing the film's themes of grief, friendship, trauma, forgiveness, and the human instinct to survive. Through a combination of dramatic performances and emotionally charged character interactions, the cast helps transform the film's simple premise into a tense and psychologically engaging thriller. Grace Carolyn Curry stars as Becky Connor, the film's central protagonist. Becky is an experienced rock climber whose life is forever changed after witnessing the tragic death of her husband during a climbing expedition. Devastated by the accident, she spends the following year isolated from family and friends, overwhelmed by grief, depression, and survivor's guilt. Once an adventurous and fearless climber, Becky loses all confidence and withdraws from the world, struggling to find purpose after her loss. Her decision to accompany her best friend on one final climb becomes both a physical challenge and an emotional journey toward healing. Throughout the film, Curry portrays Becky's gradual transformation from a broken and emotionally fragile widow into a determined survivor forced to confront impossible circumstances. As Becky battles dehydration, hunger, exhaustion, fear, and psychological trauma while stranded atop the abandoned television tower, Curry delivers a performance that convincingly captures both the physical hardship and emotional resilience of a woman fighting to survive. Her portrayal was widely praised by critics for balancing vulnerability, courage, and determination while carrying the majority of the film's narrative almost entirely through her performance. Virginia Gardner portrays Shiloh Hunter, Becky's adventurous best friend and fellow climber. Hunter is a fearless thrill-seeker and social media influencer who regularly documents dangerous adventures for her online audience. Believing that Becky needs one final climb to overcome the grief that has consumed her life, Hunter persuades her to scale the abandoned B-67 television tower and scatter Dawn's ashes from its summit. Initially serving as the more confident and optimistic member of the pair, Hunter's adventurous personality contrasts sharply with Becky's cautious and emotionally withdrawn state. As their desperate situation worsens, however, Hunter reveals a hidden burden she has carried for years, confessing to a past affair with Dan that deeply strains her friendship with Becky. Gardner portrays Hunter with a mixture of confidence, compassion, humor, guilt, and emotional vulnerability, creating a complex character whose friendship with Becky remains the emotional heart of the film. As the story unfolds, Hunter's role becomes increasingly significant, ultimately contributing to one of the film's most shocking psychological revelations. Mason Gooding appears as Dan Connor, Becky's late husband and a skilled mountain climber whose tragic death serves as the catalyst for the entire story. Although Dan dies during the film's opening sequence after falling from a mountain cliff, his presence continues to shape the narrative through Becky's memories, emotional trauma, and conversations about the past. Dan is portrayed as a loving husband, experienced climber, and supportive partner whose unexpected death leaves Becky unable to move forward with her life. As the story progresses, additional revelations concerning Dawn's secret relationship with Hunter add emotional complexity to his character, demonstrating that his legacy extends beyond Becky's idealized memories. Despite his limited screen time, Gooding's performance establishes the emotional foundation upon which the film's survival story is built. Jeffrey Dean Morgan portrays James Connor, Becky's father, who struggles to reconnect with his grieving daughter following Dawn's death. Concerned by Becky's emotional collapse and increasingly self-destructive behavior, James attempts to encourage her to move forward, believing that Dan would never have wanted her to remain consumed by grief. However, his blunt honesty creates tension between father and daughter, leading Becky to distance herself from him during the year following the accident. Although James appears only intermittently throughout the film, his relationship with Becky remains emotionally significant. His unconditional love and determination to help his daughter ultimately culminate in the film's emotional conclusion, when he receives Becky's desperate message and immediately contacts emergency services, playing a vital role in her rescue. Morgan brings warmth, sincerity, and quiet emotional strength to the character, portraying a father who desperately wants to help his daughter despite not always knowing the right words to say. Julia Pace Mitchell, credited on screen as Julia Mitchell, appears as the diner server, a minor yet memorable supporting character encountered during the film's opening act. Although her screen time is brief, the diner sequence helps establish the emotional distance that has developed between Becky and the outside world following Dawn's death. The character contributes to the film's grounded realism by depicting one of the few ordinary interactions Becky experiences before embarking on the dangerous climb that becomes the story's central conflict. Jasper Cole portrays Steve, commonly referred to as the RV man with the dog. While camping in the desert near the abandoned B-67 tower, Steve unknowingly becomes one of Becky and Hunter's few potential opportunities for a rescue. After the stranded women desperately attempt to attract his attention by firing an emergency flare into the night sky, Steve witnesses the signal but ultimately becomes involved in an act of theft, driving away in Hunter's vehicle rather than investigating the source of the flare. His actions inadvertently eliminate one of the protagonist's best chances of escaping their predicament, increasing both the tension and desperation of the survival story. Though appearing only briefly, Cole's performance contributes to one of the film's most frustrating and suspenseful sequences, emphasizing how close Becky and Hunter come to being rescued before their hopes are cruelly dashed. Together, the performances of the principal and supporting cast create an emotionally grounded foundation for Fall, allowing the film's intense survival sequences to resonate not only through physical danger but also through believable relationships and psychological conflict. The chemistry between Grace Carolyn Curry and Virginia Gardner, in particular, was widely recognized as one of the film's greatest strengths, with critics praising their ability to sustain the narrative almost entirely through their performances while conveying the fear, desperation, grief, and resilience that defined the film's emotional core. The development and production of Fall were driven by director Scott Mann's ambition to create an immersive survival thriller that relied on practical filmmaking techniques rather than extensive computer-generated imagery. The project was originally conceived as a short film, built around a simple but powerful premise exploring one of humanity's most universal fears, the fear of extreme heights and falling. While developing ideas for future projects, Mann realized that this concept had the potential to sustain a feature-length narrative if combined with emotionally compelling characters and a realistic survival scenario. Instead of focusing on supernatural threats or conventional action, he envisioned a suspense film in which the environment itself would become the primary antagonist, forcing audiences to experience the same anxiety, vulnerability, and helplessness as the characters stranded hundreds of feet above the ground. According to Scott Mann, the inspiration for the story originated during the production of his 2018 action film Final Score, which was filmed inside a large football stadium in the United Kingdom. While working on sequences that required filming at significant heights, Mann and members of the production crew began discussing humanity's instinctive fear of falling and the psychological effect that extreme elevation has on people. Reflecting on those conversations, Mann explained that the experience sparked the central concept for Fall, stating, "We were filming at height, and off-camera we got into this interesting conversation about height and the fear of falling and how that's inside of all of us, really, and how that can be a great device for a movie." This realization ultimately evolved into the film's central premise, a survival thriller in which two climbers become trapped atop a towering television mast with no realistic means of escape, allowing the fear of height itself to become one of the story's most powerful dramatic elements. Principal photography was carried out in the Shadow Mountains of California's Mojave Desert, where the filmmakers took advantage of the region's vast open landscapes, rugged rock formations, and isolated desert environment to create the film's convincing sense of remoteness. The production was filmed using IMAX-certified cameras and presentation formats, enabling the filmmakers to capture expansive panoramic vistas and emphasize the dizzying scale of the tower. The higher-resolution cinematography played a crucial role in immersing audiences within the characters' terrifying predicament, with sweeping aerial shots, dramatic overhead angles, and vertigo-inducing perspectives designed to heighten feelings of anxiety and claustrophobia despite the openness of the surrounding desert. The fictional B-67 television broadcasting tower, which serves as the film's primary setting, was inspired by the real-life KXTV cover transmission tower located in Walnut Grove, California. Standing approximately 2,049 feet, 625 meters, tall, the real tower ranks among the tallest freestanding structures in the world and provided the visual foundation for the fictional B-67 featured in the film. Rather than directly replicating the actual tower, the filmmakers adapted its appearance and proportions to create a believable yet fictional structure capable of supporting the story's survival scenario. Every detail of the tower, from its rusted ladders and narrow maintenance platforms to its communication dishes and aviation warning lights, was carefully designed to reinforce the realism of the setting while contributing to the escalating tension experienced throughout the film. One of the production's defining creative decisions involved minimizing the use of green screen technology and fully digital environments. According to Scott Mann, the filmmakers briefly explored the possibility of shooting the tower sequences against digital backgrounds or inside a visual effects studio. However, they ultimately concluded that the actors' performances and the audience's emotional investment would benefit significantly from working within a practical environment. To achieve the illusion of extraordinary height while maintaining safety, the production team constructed a detailed replica of the tower's upper maintenance platform on top of an actual mountain in the Mojave Desert. Although the actors were physically elevated only around 100 feet, 30 meters, above the ground during filming, The mountain's already considerable elevation created the convincing illusion that they were suspended more than 2,000 feet in the air. This innovative approach allowed the filmmakers to capture genuine performances, natural lighting, authentic environmental conditions, and realistic camera perspectives that would have been difficult to reproduce convincingly through visual effects alone. Lead actresses Grace Carolyn Curry and Virginia Gardner played a particularly important role in maintaining the production's realism. Although professional stunt performers were made available throughout filming, both actresses chose to perform the vast majority of their own stunts, believing that physically experiencing the demanding conditions would enhance the authenticity of their performances. This decision required extensive preparation, including climbing instruction, safety training, harness work, and rehearsals designed to familiarize them with the challenging filming environment. Throughout production, Curry and Gardner spent long hours suspended from safety rigs, climbing narrow ladders, balancing on confined platforms, and performing emotionally demanding scenes while exposed to genuine heights and harsh outdoor conditions. Their commitment allowed the filmmakers to rely heavily on close-up photography and extended takes, reducing the need for stunt doubles and helping audiences remain immersed in the story. Filming proved to be an exceptionally demanding experience due to the unpredictable conditions of the Mojave Desert. Because the tower set was constructed on an exposed mountain summit, the cast and crew were frequently subjected to strong winds, extreme temperatures, and rapidly changing weather throughout production. Powerful gusts often caused the tower structure to sway slightly, increasing both the physical difficulty of filming and the realism visible on screen. In addition, lightning storms occasionally forced production to halt for safety reasons, as the metal tower and elevated filming location created obvious hazards for everyone involved. The combination of intense desert heat during the day, cooler nighttime temperatures, and difficult access to the mountaintop filming location presented significant logistical challenges for the production team, requiring careful planning to ensure both efficiency and safety. Despite its ambitious visual concept and technically demanding production, Fall was produced on a remarkably modest budget of approximately $3 million. Working within these financial constraints, Scott Mann and his team prioritized practical effects, carefully planned cinematography, real-world locations, and innovative set construction over expensive computer-generated imagery. This resourceful approach enabled the filmmakers to create a convincing illusion of immense height while maintaining a level of realism that became one of the film's defining strengths. The combination of practical filmmaking techniques, immersive cinematography, committed performances, and inventive production design allowed Fall to deliver an intense cinematic experience that far exceeded the expectations typically associated with its modest budget, ultimately becoming one of the film's most widely praised achievements. The post-production process for Fall played a crucial role in shaping the film's final release, involving not only the completion of editing, sound design, and visual effects, but also significant technological innovations that attracted widespread attention within the film industry. Although the film was independently produced by T-Shop Productions and Capstone Pictures, its distribution strategy changed considerably once principal photography and initial post-production had been completed. Following the completion of the first cut, Lionsgate Films acquired the worldwide distribution rights to the film. Unlike many traditional distribution agreements, the acquisition was completed without a minimum guarantee to the producers, allowing Lionsgate to evaluate the project's commercial potential before determining the scale of its release. Early test screenings proved highly successful, with audiences responding enthusiastically to the film's suspense, emotional intensity, and unique survival premise. Encouraged by this positive reception, Lionsgate decided to give Fall a full theatrical release rather than pursuing a more limited distribution strategy, expressing confidence that the film's high-concept premise and strong word of mouth could attract a broad audience. As post-production progressed, one of the studio's primary concerns centered on the film's age classification. The original version of Fall contained more than 30 uses of the word fuck, a level of strong language that would almost certainly have resulted in an R rating from the Motion Picture Association, NPA. Lionsgate believed that an R rating would significantly reduce the film's commercial potential by limiting its accessibility to younger audiences and families. In order to maximize box office performance and expand the film's potential audience, the studio requested that the filmmakers modify the dialogue so that the film could qualify for a PG-13 rating. Achieving this rating required reducing the frequency of explicit language while preserving the natural performances and emotional intensity of the original scenes. Ordinarily, making such extensive dialogue changes would have required the cast to return for costly and time-consuming reshoots or automated dialogue replacement (ADR) sessions, followed by extensive visual effects work to ensure the new dialogue matched the actors' lip movements, rather than undertaking traditional reshoots. However, the filmmakers employed an innovative solution using emerging artificial intelligence technology. The production partnered with Flawless, a visual effects and AI company established in 2021 by Nick Lyons and Scott Mann himself. The company had developed advanced machine learning software capable of digitally altering an actor's facial movements so that newly recorded dialogue would appear perfectly synchronized with their lips, creating the illusion that the replacement words had been spoken naturally during filming. Using this groundbreaking process, later described as neural reshoots, the filmmakers digitally modified the actors' facial performances through sophisticated deep learning algorithms while simultaneously replacing explicit dialogue with alternative expressions acceptable under PG-13 guidelines. Words such as freaking and other milder substitutes replaced many of the film's original expletives without requiring the cast to physically return to the set. Because the artificial intelligence technology accurately adjusted lip movements to match the revised dialogue, audiences were unable to detect that the performances had been digitally altered. This innovative approach preserved the emotional authenticity of the actors' performances while satisfying the Motion Picture Association's language requirements. Fall became the first feature film to utilize flawless AI-assisted dialogue replacement technology on such a significant scale, marking an important milestone in the evolution of digital post-production techniques. According to director Scott Mann, the entire neural reshoot process was completed in approximately 2 weeks during the final stages of post-production, demonstrating the efficiency of the technology compared to conventional reshoots. Mann later explained that the AI-driven workflow allowed the creative team to retain the integrity of the original performances while making the necessary dialogue adjustments quickly, efficiently, and at a fraction of the cost associated with returning the cast and crew to production. Following the completion of these AI-assisted modifications, the revised version of Fall was submitted to the Motion Picture Association, where it successfully received a PG-13 rating. This classification significantly broadened the film's potential audience and was widely viewed as an important factor in its eventual commercial success. By making the film accessible to a larger demographic without substantially altering its suspenseful tone or emotional impact, Lionsgate strengthened the film's theatrical prospects while preserving the filmmaker's original creative vision. The innovative technology developed for Fall also proved valuable beyond its English-language release. The same AI-based facial synchronization process was later applied to the film's international dubbed versions, allowing foreign-language dialogue to match the actors' lip movements with unprecedented accuracy. This technique was utilized for several overseas releases, including Spanish and Japanese dubs, producing more natural-looking performances than traditional dubbing methods. Rather than simply replacing the audio while leaving the original mouth movements unchanged, the technology subtly adjusted the actors' facial animations to correspond with each translated language, creating a more immersive viewing experience for international audiences. The success of Fall's post-production innovations not only helped the film achieve its desired theatrical rating but also demonstrated the growing potential of artificial intelligence as a practical tool for modern filmmaking, localization, and digital performance enhancement. Following its successful completion and positive reception during early test screenings, Fall was officially released theatrically in the United States on August 12, 2022, by Lionsgate Films. Originally acquired as an independent production after principal photography and post-production had been completed, The film quickly gained momentum within the studio due to enthusiastic audience reactions during preview screenings. Convinced that the suspense-driven survival thriller possessed strong commercial appeal, Lionsgate opted to give the film a nationwide theatrical release rather than a limited or direct-to-streaming debut. To support the launch, the studio invested approximately $4 million in the film's distribution and marketing campaign, exceeding the film's modest $3 million production budget. The promotional campaign emphasized the film's unique high-concept premise, breathtaking cinematography, and nerve-wracking survival sequences, with trailers, television commercials, digital advertising, and social media marketing highlighting the terrifying experience of two women stranded atop a 2,000-foot, 610-meter, abandoned television tower. Marketing materials also focused heavily on the film's vertigo-inducing visuals and emotional intensity, positioning Fall as one of the year's most suspenseful theatrical experiences. The theatrical release proved to be a commercial success, attracting audiences through strong word-of-mouth and positive reactions from viewers who praised its relentless tension, practical filmmaking techniques, and immersive depiction of extreme heights. Despite being produced on a relatively modest budget, the film performed well at the box office, ultimately grossing more than $21 million worldwide, making it a profitable investment for both the filmmakers and Lionsgate. Its success demonstrated that original, high-concept thrillers could still find an audience in theaters, particularly when supported by effective marketing and positive audience recommendations. Following the conclusion of its theatrical run, Fall became available through digital home entertainment platforms on September 27, 2022. The digital release allowed audiences to rent or purchase the film through a wide range of online video-on-demand services, providing viewers with the opportunity to experience the survival thriller from home. The digital edition preserved the film's high-definition presentation and immersive sound design while expanding its accessibility beyond theatrical audiences. The release also introduced the film to new viewers who had been unable to see it during its theatrical engagement, further contributing to its growing popularity. The film subsequently received its physical home media release on October 18, 2022. When it was made available on Blu-ray and DVD formats. These editions offered fans and collectors the opportunity to own the film in high-definition and standard-definition physical formats, ensuring its long-term availability within home entertainment collections. The Blu-ray presentations showcased the film's detailed cinematography, expansive desert landscapes, and vertigo-inducing aerial photography with enhanced picture quality and audio fidelity, allowing viewers to fully appreciate the production's practical visual approach. Together, the theatrical, digital, and physical media releases ensured that Fall reached audiences across multiple viewing platforms, helping the film maintain its momentum beyond its initial cinema run and further establishing it as one of the most successful independent survival thrillers of 2022. Fall proved to be a notable commercial success, particularly considering its modest production budget and independent origins. Produced for an estimated $3 million, the survival thriller ultimately earned approximately $21.8 million worldwide, generating a return of more than 7 times its production cost before additional revenue from home entertainment, digital rentals, streaming, and television licensing was taken into account. Of the film's worldwide earnings, $7.2 million came from the United States and Canada, while $14.6 million was generated from international markets, demonstrating that the film's suspense-driven premise and universal themes of survival resonated strongly with audiences around the world. The impressive financial performance established Fall as one of the most profitable low-budget thrillers of 2022 and further reinforced the commercial viability of original high-concept survival films outside established franchises. In the United States and Canada, Fall was released theatrically on August 12, 2022. During a competitive late summer box office frame, the film opened alongside the comedy Macrita and the nationwide expansion of the horror comedy Bodies, both of which were also targeting moviegoers during the same weekend. Despite facing competition from several hold-over releases and new theatrical debuts, Industry analysts projected that Fall would earn between $1 million and $2 million during its opening weekend from 1,548 theaters. These relatively modest expectations reflected both the film's independent status and its limited marketing budget compared with larger studio releases. During its opening day, Fall earned approximately $923,000, including revenue from Thursday preview screenings and Friday ticket sales. Positive audience reactions and favorable word of mouth helped the film outperform initial industry projections over the remainder of the weekend. By the end of its opening frame, the film had grossed approximately $2.5 million, exceeding pre-release expectations and demonstrating stronger than anticipated audience interest. Although Fall finished 10th in the domestic box office rankings for the weekend, it achieved a noteworthy distinction by becoming the highest-grossing newly released film of that particular frame, outperforming the other new nationwide releases despite its comparatively small production and marketing budgets. One of the most remarkable aspects of the film's theatrical performance was its ability to maintain audience interest through positive word of mouth. Viewers frequently praised the film's suspenseful premise, immersive cinematography, realistic portrayal of extreme heights, and the committed performances of Grace Carolyn Curry and Virginia Gardner, encouraging additional moviegoers to experience the film in theaters. Rather than relying on blockbuster-scale marketing or franchise recognition, Fall benefited from strong audience recommendations and widespread discussions surrounding its vertigo-inducing visuals and relentless tension. This sustained interest allowed the film to remain commercially viable throughout its theatrical run despite competing against significantly larger studio productions. Internationally, Fall performed even more strongly than it did domestically, earning approximately $14.6 million across overseas territories. The film's simple yet universally accessible survival premise, minimal reliance on culturally specific storytelling, and emphasis on visual suspense enabled it to connect with audiences across numerous international markets. The global appeal of its high-concept narrative, combined with Lionsgate's distribution strategy and the film's favorable critical and audience reception, contributed substantially to its overseas success. Ultimately, Fall concluded its worldwide theatrical run with a total gross of approximately $21.8 million, comfortably surpassing its $3 million production budget and becoming a profitable theatrical release. The film's financial success was particularly significant because it demonstrated how an original, independently produced thriller could achieve impressive commercial results through effective marketing, positive audience reception, and a compelling cinematic concept. Combined with strong digital sales, home media performance, streaming availability, and the subsequent announcement of a sequel, the box office success of Fall firmly established the film as one of the standout independent survival thrillers of the early 2020s and laid the foundation for its evolution into a developing franchise. Fall received a generally positive critical response following its theatrical release, with reviewers praising its ability to create sustained tension from a deceptively simple premise, as well as its immersive cinematography, convincing performances, and effective use of practical filmmaking techniques. Although some critics questioned the plausibility of certain plot developments and felt that aspects of the screenplay required a considerable suspension of disbelief, the overall consensus was that the film successfully transformed a minimalist survival concept into a gripping psychological thriller. Many reviewers highlighted the film's remarkable ability to maintain suspense for nearly its entire runtime, noting that its depiction of extreme heights and isolation created an intense viewing experience that resonated with audiences. The performances of Grace Carolyn Curry and Virginia Gardner were frequently singled out from praise, with critics commending the actresses for carrying much of the film through emotionally convincing and physically demanding performances. On the review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes, Fall holds an approval rating of 79% based on 151 professional critic reviews, with an average rating of 6.4 out of 10. The site's critical consensus summarizes the film by stating, "Fundamentally absurd yet as evocatively minimalist as its title, Fall is a sustained adrenaline rush for viewers willing to suspend disbelief." This consensus reflects the general opinion among critics that, Although the story occasionally stretches credibility, the film's relentless suspense, effective pacing, and immersive atmosphere outweigh its narrative shortcomings. Many reviewers also praised the filmmaker's decision to rely heavily on practical locations and real-world cinematography rather than excessive computer-generated imagery, arguing that this approach significantly enhanced the film's realism and amplified the audience's sense of vertigo throughout the story. Review aggregation website Metacritic, which assigns a weighted average score based on selected professional reviews, awarded Fall a score of 62 out of 100, calculated from 23 critic reviews. This rating indicates generally favorable reviews, suggesting that while critical opinions varied regarding the screenplay and realism of certain survival scenarios, the overall reception remained positive. Critics contributing to Metacritic frequently praised the film's technical execution, suspenseful direction, cinematography, and the commitment of its lead actresses, while some expressed reservations about portions of the dialogue, character decisions, and narrative logic. Even among reviewers who offered more mixed assessments, there was broad agreement that the film effectively delivered an engaging and suspenseful cinematic experience. Audience reception was similarly favorable. Moviegoers surveyed by CinemaScore, which polls audiences immediately following theatrical screenings, awarded Fall an average grade of B on the organization's traditional A+ to F scale. While not indicating overwhelming enthusiasm, this score reflected generally positive audience satisfaction for a suspense-driven survival thriller whose appeal depended heavily on tension and psychological discomfort. Meanwhile, audience research conducted by Post-Track found that viewers gave the film an overall 69% positive rating, with 44% of respondents stating that they would definitely recommend the film to others. These audience metrics suggested that while the film's nerve-wracking premise and relentless suspense might not appeal equally to all viewers, many appreciated its originality, emotional intensity, and immersive presentation. Across both critical and audience responses, Fall was consistently recognized for transforming a relatively straightforward survival scenario into an engaging cinematic experience through strong performances, skillful direction, and effective visual storytelling. Reviewers frequently cited the film's breathtaking depiction of extreme heights, practical production techniques, and claustrophobic atmosphere as its greatest strengths, while acknowledging that the screenplay occasionally relied on improbable situations to sustain the narrative. Nevertheless, the film's ability to generate continuous suspense, combined with the emotional performances of Grace Carolyn Curry and Virginia Gardner, ultimately earned it a reputation as one of the most effective and memorable survival thrillers released in 2022. Its positive reception from both critics and audiences, coupled with its commercial success, ultimately contributed to the development of the sequel, Fall 2, Dead Point, further establishing the original film as the foundation of an emerging survival thriller franchise. Review 1. Survival movies have been around for quite some time and have had mixed results with viewers. Tales of death-defying moments of surviving the unbridled wrath of natural elements, surreal circumstances, and unlucky situations have always been fixed point of fascination with storytelling, leading to one suspense after another and finding thrills within those fight-for-flight moments. Yet, sometimes these films struggle to find a proper balance within its own context, with an unbalanced presentation of trying to focus more on the actual survival sequences, scares, suspense, and thrills, and not much on its characters and story progression. Sometimes narrative can be well-founded within true-life events, that is, based on a true story, while other times some survival accounts were created from fiction. Such prime examples of lates includes 2015's The Martian, 2015's Everest, 2016's The Revenant, 2017's 47 Meters Down, 2018's Adrift, 2019's Crawl, and many others. Now, Lionsgate and director Scott Mann released the latest film to tackle such suspenseful thrills of surviving a dangerous situation in the movie titled Fall. Does this latest project find the right stuff to present a dizzying and terrifying scenario, or is it just a shell of a story with a weak premise? The story. Dan, Mason Gooding, and Becky, Grace Carolyn Curry, Connor are adrenaline junkies, looking to find the next up excitement of exploring and adventure through nature. Taking a trip to the mountain, the couple, who are joined by their friend Shiloh Hunter, Virginia Gardner, are ready for a climbing expedition, with a threesome scaling the mountainside towards the peak. Unfortunately, disaster quickly befalls the group, with Dan losing his footing and plunges to his death during the high climb, leaving his wife shattered over the loss of life situation. A year later, Becky is drowning in sorrow and turns towards alcohol, unable to process her grief, which worries her estranged father, James, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who is urging his daughter to get past her fears. Rescuing to her aid, Hunter has the perfect remedy to help her friend, pushing Becky to join her as she seeks out the B-67 TV tower, which was once the highest structure in America. Now, however, the towering derelict structure is rusted over, and loose bolts litter the metallic overhang, but Hunter has a YouTube channel to fill, beginning her ascent with Becky, who's trying to stay out of her head. When the pair get to the top of the tower, the ladder crumbles underneath them, stranding the friends, who are forced to work with limited options at their disposal as their fleeting happy moments are dashed by trying to survive on top of a 2,000-feet tower and try to attract help from down below. The good, the bad, as I mentioned above, survival movies or project endeavors have been its fair share of mixed opinions throughout the years. Of course, there are plenty of so-called survival features, including more science fiction ones, that is, cosmic disasters, alien invasions, and unearthed primordial creatures, but the ones I'm mostly talking about are the more realistic survival features that usually focus surviving natural environments, battling the elements, and dangerous real-life situations. Naturally, filmmakers clearly want to show us, the viewers, the dangers and sometimes horrific events of being stuck in these circumstances in both the physical state of everything, characters and environment, but also in the mental stability in the usage of losing hope and acceptance of life finality when things look bleak. Some great survival movies have clearly demonstrated these proper balance as well. Cinematic flourishes, including The Martian, The Revenant, 127 Hours, Everest, The Great, and others. The flip side to that is that there are films that lack the proper guidance in wanting to showcase such balance and end up with weak characterization or lacking a proper narration that surrounds a weak survival premise, including Survival Island, 47 Meters Down, and 47 Meters Down, Uncaged. Regardless of which one, survival-style movies shine as beacon of understanding of the enduring of the human spirit of finding a way to survive through harsh conditions and even harsher scenarios. Of course, this brings me back to talking about Fall, a 2022 survival thriller and the latest feature film offering of the cinematic variety of suspenseful storytelling. To be quite honest, I really didn't hear much about this movie, which was mostly due because the project is moderately a low-budget production, with not a whole of marketing campaign funds to spend on the project. I think my first introduction to this movie was when I saw the film's movie trailer a few months back when I first saw during the coming attractions previews when I went to the theaters during the summertime. From the trailer preview alone, the movie looked to have a weak premise. I don't know a broken bar, it was just a feeling that I had with it. It looked like it was going to filled with some heightened fight or flight mode and some suspense moments of two 20-something-year-olds who climb a TV tower and getting stranded at the top to make for some compelling thrills. Yet, I did have linger feeling that this particular movie was going more primarily focused on the suspense, survival angle and not so much on the character, story development. So, I wasn't super keen on seeing Fall when it was scheduled to be released on August 12, 2022, and actually didn't go see in theaters. After a few weeks, I began to read a few reviews of the movie, with most critics and moviegoers having mixed opinions on it. Some said it was bad, while others said it was okay. With such a large division on opinions of the movie, I decided to check out the movie when Fall came to home release, renting it on Vudu one night to see if the movie was worth seeing. And what did I think of it? Well, I did have low expectations for this movie and those expectations were really not met. Despite a few technical filmmaking achievements and few snippets of brilliance, Fall ends up being a shallow and sometimes boring survival thriller that lacks the necessary dramatics to make up a decent endeavor. It's not disastrous terrible, just poorly managed, haphazardly half-baked, and not super exciting to fully investment in the time to watch. Fall is directed by Mann, whose previous directorial several short films such as Tug of War, Pocket Thief, and stars in Their Eyes Kids, as well as feature films like Heist and Final Score. Given his background, Mann isn't really a top-billed, known director, so it's understandable that he would tackle a small-budgeted film like Fall. To his credit, Mann somewhat does a decent job on this project. Approach the feature that primarily focus on trying to make a very vertical survival movie, with a large emphasis on the terrifying moments of being stranded on top of a lonely towering location in the middle of nowhere. To that end, Mann succeeds, with the Fall capturing those moments quite well. The suspenseful scenes presented definitely do work, with Becky and Hunter slowly rising on the old and decrepit tower and then being stranded up very broken bar. Isolated high up in the air with such little option to communicate with the world below them. The action thrills definitely help elevate the film's shortcoming, with Mann heavily focusing on these sequences to build dramatic tension as both Becky and Hunter scramble to find a way down or to get help. The small platform where the two girls have to survive on has that isolating feeling, finding their time up there to be the main set piece for the feature as they interact and try to make sense of the situation and trying a way to descend without falling or dying. Heck, there was even the fear of vulture predators, that sense of their circumstance, with Mann depicting one scene with such grueling tension that it made me squirm a little bit. Basically, if you're a person who hates heights or having the vertigo sensation while watching these types of movies, Fall might not be the right viewing experience for you. Just a precautious for some viewers out there. Just remember a broken bar like Becky and Hunter in this film. A broken bar. Don't look down. Interestingly, despite the film's limitations on encompassing a strong narrative, more on that below, The Fall does utilize several strong thematic messages in its tale. Of course, there is the depiction of overcoming grief, a broken bar. No matter the situation, with a heavy emphasis on letting go of the past and moving forward, which is quite universal. Secondly, the movie showcases facing fears to overcome challenges, which was shown with Becky ascending the TV tower to bypass her personal grief of losing Dan, which, again, is fundamental for everyone. Lastly, the actual will to survive, with the insurmountable power facing danger, and sometimes certain death, and pushing yourself to fight to survive a broken bar. Regardless if the odds are stacked against you. All of these key messages are quite palpable and to play a part of Fall's story, which can be extrapolated into the real world and for inspiring to move forward in the face of troubled times or survival circumstances. Lastly, Mann keeps the feature moving a moderately fast pace and, while it does create some problematic areas along the way, more on that below, it does semi-work in Fall's favor, with the feature having a runtime of 107 minutes, 1 hour and 47 minutes, by getting in and getting out within a reasonable time. In the end, while not perfect, Mann certainly makes Fall has some intriguing and workable moments that keeps the feature quasi-engaged with the plight that Becky and Hunter find themselves in at the top of a 2,000 feet tall TV tower and the attempts that they make to survive. For its presentation, Fall is a moderate production that doesn't require a whole lot to capture its story within a cinematic representation. That's not to say the movie looks cheap and, with only having a budget of only $3 million, I do believe that Mann and his team make the most of their production funds for the feature. So, working within the confines of the feature's budget, the movie utilizes what it can and ends up with some decent presentation through the usage of background, setting nuances. Thus, credit must be given to the film's behind-the-scenes main players, including Pete Hickok, art direction, Scott Daniel, production design, and Lisa Catalina, costume designs, for their efforts in working with such limited budget and producing something that ultimately works. In addition, the film's cinematography by McGregor is pretty good, especially with vertical shots of K67 TV tower and how dangerous the climb up it for some very dramatic looking shots and angles. Lastly, the movie's score, which was composed by Tim Despek, is incredible to listen. While I usually do praise a lot of movies for their soundtrack and musical composition utilization in the films that are presented in, this Pixar score is terrific and definitely incorporates a lot of drama nuances into the feature. The building of suspenseful moments, the bombastic pressure of dire moments, and the quieter dialogue pieces all connect beautifully in the score and help build upon the thrills that the movie throws at the viewers. Big kudos to the Pixar involvement on the project. Unfortunately, Fall, despite its survival thrills, can't quite make a compelling argument to be considered a good, let alone a decent, endeavor, with several crucial points of criticism that puncture the feature from onset to conclusion. Where do I start? Well, let's start with the most relevant Tony broken bar. The story. Of course, when I saw the film's movie trailer, I kind of knew that the film's focus was going to be primarily on the actual survival elements and not so much on any type of strong storytelling beats. Even other survival thrillers out there follow that same particular suit, with a heavier emphasis on action than story. That being said, what's presented in Fall is dismal, a broken bar to say the least. The script, which was penned by Jonathan Frank and Scott Mann, is basically a bare-bones foundation for storytelling, with a very interesting step that quickly diminishes into such a straightforward and thinly sketched tale to be told. With the movie's narrative being mostly focused on two girls stranded on top of a lonely tower, the script had such a large opportunity to explore the pair's personalities and past events within a sort of reflection flashback sequences. The script touches upon a few key elements, told through dialogue exchanges, yet it feels a bit empty-handed and could have been expanded upon for more depth and understanding of these two stranded individuals. In a nutshell, Fall is a generic run-of-the-mill survival movie, with a basic narrative points that had the potential to be something compelling, especially in its strong themes, yet never blossoms into something more than just a half-baked narrative that lacks substances. Naturally, this brings up the film's premise, which feels very weak and shallow. Of course, this particular setup does have some interesting build-up to the main attraction of the feature, yet it never fully delivers on that premise, with the Fall's narrative failing to fully encompass the story it wants to tell. Once the setup is presented, the movie devolves into a very straightforward narrative that feels one-dimensional, with a payoff that comes with a mixed conclusion. What also doesn't help the movie is in some of the dialogue lines that are presented throughout the movie, with some cheesy, a few cringeworthy words spoken that fall of deaf ears and feel wooden. This doesn't help the movie's more dramatic moments where these lines are spoken and render the movie's character lines as laughable in a few scenes. Some of these parts are a reflection upon the film's script, yet some come from Mann's direction, with some clearly struggling during several sequences of character-story balance, which makes Fall rather bland. This brings up the film's pacing, with Mann keep everything to the bare minimum of making the movie progress forward in its storytelling, and, while this does make the film move forward in a somewhat brisk manner, this comes at the expense of expanded development in the feature for more well-roundedness. In conjunction with that, the movie does feel boring, as there's not a whole lot that happens, especially during the middle portion of the feature. Perhaps one of the more craniest parts that Fall presents in the story is few moments where utter overusage of key parts that are stupid, with scenes of over-the-top disbelief. For a movie that is supposed to be grounded in reality, Mann and his team heavily imply on such sequences with great ease to help build some dramatic tension. Yet, despite that notion, these scenes come as utterly stupid and cheesy, which definitely took me out of the movie's world. The disbelief of such things could happen is mind-boggling that it lessens the feature's credibility and hinges on being laughable when they appear. Thus, while the dangers of being stranded on an abandoned TV tower might feel scary, several scenes of stupidity and big disbelief diminish such magnitude of the death-defying situation. Lastly, the film's conclusion feels quite rushed and ends up hindering the feature's final moments. Of course, the closing monologue voiceover was actually great in the movie and wraps up some of the feature's themes into that portion, yet the actual ending feels rather clunky and hollow. It's clear that the movie wanted more to say during this part and could have been easily expanded upon by closing out character development, yet it never and ultimately creates a very hurried and almost anticlimactic ending that never delivers on a full circle conclusion. The cast in Fall is kept relatively small and have their moments in the spotlight for some decent performances here and there, yet, this small collection of talent falters with such a flimsy script and thinly presented material that they have difficulty in trying to build upon with little go on. Naturally, the movie's two main protagonist characters, Becky Connor and Shiloh Hunter, get the most screen time in the film, with actresses Grace Carolyn Curry and Virginia Gardner doing most of the heavy lifting throughout the majority of the feature. Of the two, Curry, who is known for her roles in Revenge, Annabelle, Creation, and Shazam, is the film's true main protagonist of the feature and gets more of the substance, dialogue lines and dramatics than her co-star lead. For her part, I think that Curry does a pretty decent job, yet still feels like a shallow main character. Of course, that's not so much on Curry's performance, but mostly on how she is written in the movie, with vague notions of her pastor and some corny lines to match it. It's not for a lack of trying, as we, the viewers, do sympathize with some of Becky's past troubles and current circumstances, and yet something all about rings hollow. Thus, despite Curry's attempt to help elevate the character, Beck ultimately becomes such an adequate main character that feels half-baked due to the feature's lack of script shaping and wooden dialogue moments. Yet, I do have to admit that the final monologue scene that Curry's Becky says was pretty good. Behind her, Gardner, who is known for her roles in Halloween, Project Almanac, and All the Bright Places, gets to toil around with some of the story's more comedic lines, with most of levity being sprinkled throughout the movie's plot. That's not saying that they are hilarious, but those moments do help break up the tension in many of the film's more suspenseful scenes. Like Curry, Gardner gets a good amount of dialogue lines to handle, yet most of the written lines, and how her character of Hunter is presented, comes as wonky, a bit limp, as if important pieces of character were scrapped from the feature and ended up on the cutting room floor. Unfortunately, looking beyond those two characters, the other two supporting players in the movie are woefully underdeveloped, despite their importance in the Falls story. This includes the characters Dan Connor and James, Becky's husband and Becky's dad, who is played by actors Mason Gooding and Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Both give decent performance within the limited time that they are on screen in the film, so their acting ability is a bad point, but rather their overall involvement on the project. It's basically how both Dan and James are written into the movie and how they are utilized in the script that renders these particular individuals rather poorly. Dan plays a pivotal part in the Fall, and, despite that notion, he doesn't amount to just being a throwaway character at the beginning of the feature. It would have been interesting to see more flashback scenes with him and Becky, and maybe even Hunter as well. That could have been beneficial to the movie and could have added context to the relationship that the three of them had with each other. The same can be said with James, with the parental figure in Becky's life being heavily implied on being strained and having a sort of estrangement amongst the pair. Again, there was the potential for so much more of exploring the relationships between Beck and James through more additional scenes as well as a few flashback moments. However, they are not present in the movie, with both Gooding and Morgan doing the best they can with such small material given to them and so minimal of screen time in the Fall. Thus, they end up being rather forgettable, underwhelming, and just underutilized the feature. Plus, Morgan, who was the big recognizable name of the feature, is just criminally underwhelming and limited in the feature by only bookending the movie. Such a shame and a disappointment. The rest of the cast, including actor Jasper Cole, The Family Business and Everybody Hates Chris, as Steve, actor Daryl Dennis, Guilt-Free Zone and Blackstone, as Randy, actor Bam Erickson, Station 19 An American Crime Story, as an unnamed police officer, and actress Julia Pace Mitchell, The Young and the Restless and All the Queen's Men, as the unnamed dinner server, are mostly very minor supporting characters in the movie, with most, if not all, only having one scene in the movie and that's it. Nothing bad, just very minor roles in Fall. Final thoughts: trying to pull her friend out of grieving funk, Hunter drags her friend Becky to climb a nearby 2,000 feet TV tower in the middle of the desert for one last adrenaline-filled escapade that turns dire when the pair gets stranded up there and no way down in the movie Fall. Director Scott Mann's latest film takes the classic survival thriller theatrics and turns those efforts into a vertical scaling misadventure escapade of death-defying antics of trying to find a way down and receive help reaches dizzying heights. Unfortunately, while some elements do work in the film, the rest falter and crumble underneath such ambitions, especially in a weak premise, weaker narrative beats, cheesy dialogue moments, missed storytelling opportunities, a rushed conclusion, unrealistic scenes, and underutilized characters. Personally, I particularly didn't care for this movie. I did have low expectations for this movie and, while there were a few nuances that I did like it, a great majority of the project felt half-baked and underwhelming for a feature film endeavor. Perhaps the movie could have worked as a short film, 9 or 10 minutes length, rather than stretching a simple plot for a motion picture length. Thus, my recommendation for this movie is just a simple skip it, as it really doesn't bring that much value of watching it nor replayability. You're better watching another survival movie to get your kicks of suspenseful thrills. In the end, Fall is a mixed bag of content that strives to a powerhouse survival thriller in its technical achievement and atmospheric heights, yet ends up being a contrived and poorly executed that makes the whole affair a tiresome and utterly forgettable cinematic endeavor. 2.5 out of 5. Skip It, released on August 12, 2022. Reviewed on November 29, 2022. Fall is 107 minutes long and is rated PG-13 for some bloody images, intense peril, and strong language too. Fall is a new thriller that is part survival and part fear of heights terror. It works surprisingly well, and can even handle the fairly long runtime. In other words, do check it out. Read our full Fall movie review here. Fall is a new fear of heights thriller that is every bit as much a subgenre as shark horror is. I mean, just think about how many people suffer from fear of heights. Also, for most people, it's a fear they're confronted with quite often. Not many people, who fear sharks, ever have to be near them. I wasn't sure that this movie could handle a runtime of 1 hour and 47 minutes. In my mind, this should be around the 90-minute mark. However, yet again, I had to just pack away my own ideas about what should be. This movie has enough to last as long as it does. Continue reading our Fall movie review below. The film is out in theaters from August 12, 2022. Simple concept, perfectly executed. The story that turned into Fall was actually conceived as a short film. Fortunately, it turned out that there was enough there to create a feature film, inspired by movies such as Brad Bird's Mission Impossible: A Ghost Protocol, where the Burj Khalifa Tower in Dubai is scaled, and Elizabeth Chivas Arhalai Jimmy Chin's Oscar-registered winning documentary Free Solo. They went to work. Especially that last one is easy to see in the opening scene. The result: best friends Becky, Grace Carolyn Curry, and Hunter, Virginia Gardner, climb 2,000 feet to the top of a remote, abandoned radio tower. After reaching the platform and getting ready to get back down, pieces of the tower collapse and they find themselves stranded with no way down. For a few moments, I did fear that some relationship drama would take up space. However, it was just a small part of the movie. Also, while some elements along the way might annoy you, just hang in there until the complete story has been told. No green screen, just pure terror to keep it real and get all the best shots. The filmmakers decided to actually shoot this on a platform out in the real world. Sure, some movie magic is included. They're not the full 2,000 feet in the air with no safety net, but no green screen was used for Fall. Of course, this also meant that the casting included making sure that the two stars could handle heights. Fortunately, both Grace Carolyn Curry, Becky, and Virginia Gardner, Hunter, could work with heights. Both work remarkably well in this movie. In the only other two roles that actually matter, we see Jeffrey Dean Morgan, the Unholy, as Becky's father, while Mason Gooding, Scream 5, plays her husband. Insanely sweaty palms. While I am not crazy about heights, I don't really have a fear of heights. I know as much because my Heaven of Horror co-founder, Nadia, does have a fear of heights. As a result, her palms, and even her feet, started sweating profusely, a broken bar, and that was from just watching the trailer. Watching the entire Fall movie was like an actual workout. Within the 107-minute runtime, there is probably at least a good 90 minutes of full-on terror for anyone uncomfortable with heights. While I was experiencing increased heart rate and thought it was very fascinating, and yes, out of my comfort zone, she was sweating and squirming, so much that her Fitbit complimented her on the fact that she was getting a solid workout. What I'm trying to say is simply that watching this survival movie will probably feel like an actual survival experience if you have a fear of heights. Consider yourself warned. And also, go for it. It's a great way to explore just how bad your fear of heights is. Watch Fall in theaters if you dare. Scott Mann is the director of Fall, with the screenplay written by him and Jonathan Frank. Mara. Scott Mann previously directed the movies The Tournament, 2009, and Heist, 2015. Currently, the two have a new survival movie in pre-production. The title is Tsunami LA, which probably tells you all you need to know. To double down on having people attached who knew how to create survival terror, producer James Harris is also on board. He produced the movie 47 Meters Down, which deals with both the fear of sharks as well as claustrophobia and fear of drowning. With Fall, the filmmakers have stated that they wanted it to be the ultimate fear of heights movie, and they might just have succeeded. The simplicity of this concept is executed so well that it gets under your skin as the story, and survival element of the story, evolves. Fall is out in theaters from August 12, 2022. Director, Scott Mann. Writers, Scott Mann, Jonathan Frank. Cast, Grace Carolyn Curry, Virginia Gardner, Mason Gooding, Jeffrey Dean Morgan. For best friends Becky, Grace Carolyn Curry, and Hunter, Virginia Gardner. Life is all about conquering fears and pushing limits. But after they climb 2,000 feet to the top of a remote, abandoned radio tower, they find themselves stranded with no way down. Now Becky and Hunter's expert climbing skills will be put to the ultimate test as they desperately fight to survive the elements, a lack of supplies, and vertigo-inducing heights in this adrenaline-fueled thriller starring Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Karina Scream Queen Adelga Erda. I write reviews and recaps on Heaven of Horror. And yes, it does happen that I find myself screaming when watching a good horror movie. I love psychological horror, survival horror, and kick-ass women. Also, I have a huge soft spot for a good horror comedy. Oh yeah, and I absolutely hate when animals are harmed in movies. So I will immediately think less of any movie where animals are harmed for entertainment, even if the animals are just really good actors. Fortunately, horror doesn't use this nearly as much as comedy, and people assume horror lovers are the messed up ones. Go figure. 3. Two young women are trapped on top of a 2,000 feet tower in an absolutely absurd yet undeniably effective nightmare. Pre-release debates over the title of Jordan Peele's patchy summer hit Nope were settled last month when the secretive writer-director revealed that no, it wasn't an acronym for Not of Planet Earth, but was something far more simple. It was, as others had expected, a nod to what many audiences are accustomed to: wearily shouting at the screen during a horror film. Investigate that unsettling sound coming from a barely lit basement in a remote house late at night? Nope. Accept a lift from a creepy stranger in a blood-spattered pickup truck? Nope. Climb up an ancient and abandoned 2,000 feet TV tower without support, food, or alerting anyone else first? Nope. With the release of ridiculous yet undeniably rattling new thriller Fall, it'll be heard on a loop from cinemagoers across the U.S. this weekend, said first with an eye roll before being screamed through sweat-drenched fingers. Hinged on a setup so stupid that it takes some strength to make it through the first 15 minutes without checking out, the buzz-free August surprise manages to erase all early doubt with enough genuine seat-edge suspense to turn it into the most exciting and effectively agonizing action movie of the summer. I found it hard not to quietly cheer while watching this tiny-budgeted underdog swoop in and climb its way to the top of the tower. Mavericks, thoughtless and gray men falling away with speed. In a sub-cliffhanger cold open, Becky, Grace Carolyn Curry, suffers a devastating loss when her husband Dan, Mason Gooding, falls to his death in a climbing accident, leaving her and best friend Hunter, Virginia Gardner, to pick up the pieces. A year later, Becky is drowning her sorrows when Hunter, now a successful YouTuber specializing in extreme stunts, calls, saving her from the brink. The estranged pair reunite when Hunter suggests she join her on an audacious climb to the top of a 2,000-foot tower in the middle of the desert. Spurred on by a vague idea of confronting fear, she says yes, but when they reach the very top, disaster strikes. The ladder falls away and they're left stranded. It's all head-shakingly ridiculous, and while the script isn't equipped to find a believable justification as to why someone trying to get over such horrific drama would want to do something quite so deranged, none of that really matters once we're halfway up, a point that we're chillingly reminded is the height of the Eiffel Tower. While the dodgy green screen in the cold open had me worried, despite an astonishingly low $3 million budget, British director Mann manages to make the high-in-the-sky danger feel scarily, stomach-churningly real, and if the pace allowed for it, it'd be tempting to Google just how on earth they managed it all while watching. Despite obvious VFX work, even Tom Cruise would turn down such a stunt. The joints are so hard to spot and the illusion so skillfully conjured that I found myself utterly, horribly immersed in the big dumb spectacle of it all. Spanish cinematographer McGregor and an A-game visual effects team used the structure's perspective to breathtaking, dizzyingly queasy effect and even find time for some rather stunning standalone images, briefly transforming a B-movie into something oddly artful. Stupidity might have got the pair up to the top, but their actions once situated are grounded and satisfyingly competent. Mann and co-writer Jonathan Frank finding an impressive amount of mileage from two people stuck on a small grate with a small bag. It's a puzzle for them to solve, and like the very best survival movies, it has us trying to solve it alongside, could that or would that or how about questions tidily fitting in between the steady stream of nopes. There are two silly, derivative twists, the first incredibly easy to spot and the second incredibly easy to get annoyed with. But it's mostly a pretty straightforward against-the-odds thriller, a throwback of sorts with some slight new tech tweaks. Who knew a selfie stick could be such a vital emergency tool? The tension of it all is heightened even more so by two fully committed performances from little-known actors giving it their all, trying admirably hard to sell some laughably goofy dialogue during a physically grueling vertical obstacle course. Gardner emerges as the real standout, possessing the effervescence of a young Reese Witherspoon. Fall is the rare three drinks and what if elevator pitch that somehow survived the journey to the big screen. Made with unusual precision and punch, director Mann sets his sights low even as his simple, sturdy film climbs so very, very high, and in doing so, delivers in a way that so few have this year. A $3 million embarrassment to the studios, throwing 100 times more at blockbusters with 100 times less of a thrill factor. Arriving in the dog days of summer, it's something of a marvel. Fall is out in US cinemas on 12th of August and in the UK on 2nd of September. Fall is a very good don't look down movie. It's a fun, occasionally cheesy, but mostly ingeniously made thriller about two daredevil climbers, Becky, Grace Carolyn Curry, and Hunter, Virginia Gardner, who decide to scale the B-67 TV Tower, an abandoned 2,000-foot communication tower that juts up in the middle of the California desert. It's based on an actual structure, the KXTV,